continuing story of Peyton Place. Starring Dorothy Malone as Constance Mackenzie, Ed Nelson as Michael Rossi, Ryan O'Neill as Rodney Harrington, Barbara Parkins as Betty Anderson, Tim O'Connor as Elliot Carson, Christopher Connolly as Norman Harrington, Patricia Morrow as Rita Harrington, James Douglas as Stephen Cord.
A portrait commissioned by Martin Peyton, a bright symbol of Betty Anderson Cord's future, now threatened by a tarnished image out of her past. A frightened, disheveled girl in the hallway of a New York apartment, accepting money from a strange man. Leslie Harrington has an eyewitness account of the incident, the Blaine report, and he has given Betty an ultimatum. A glimpse of the will now locked in Peyton's safe, or a copy of the Blaine report will be delivered to her husband, Stephen. There is a third choice, to reveal the whole truth to Martin Peyton.
Well, what's the verdict? Do you think the artist can do you justice?
You can't tell just yet.
I don't think Mr. Costa would like you taking a peek at his preliminary sketch. Artists never do. Well, he should be here shortly. You'd better open the safe. Unless you've developed some new misgivings about wearing Catherine's necklace.
No.
Good. I don't want to refight that battle. Has Stephen gotten wind of our little surprise?
I haven't told him yet.
He has a genius for smelling out secrets, which once discovered demand endless explanations that don't do any good. Men like your husband always manage to put the women they love on the defensive.
Why are we talking about Stephen?
Because it angers me to see you make a fetish of his insecurities. You were delighted when we started the portrait. Now you seem to have doubts.
They're not Stephen's insecurities, they're mine. Look at me. Daughter of the town drunk, high school dropout, very widely traveled. A honeymoon on Cape Cod, several visits to Boston, and 1 week in New York.
What are you trying to say, Betty?
Oh, I feel as if I were at a masquerade. This isn't me. And wearing your daughter's jewels won't make me another Catherine.
I don't want you to be anything but yourself.
Well, what about Stephen? What if I should hold him back from achieving his ambitions?
Why all these misgivings so suddenly?
You know who would be the perfect wife for Stephen? A debutante from a prominent family.
With an Ivy League college background. Have you suggested it to him? I have. Oh, before Stephen married you, of course. Oh, colleges and debuts. These are trivialities.
Only if you're born to them can you take them for granted.
My daughter Catherine's debut was a social event of the Boston season. A glittering occasion, graced by the distinguished presence of the governor and his lady, and only slightly marred by the fact that Catherine's infant child, your husband Stephen, was lying asleep upstairs in Anna Cord's bedroom. Catherine found this all highly amusing, the contrast between her recent motherhood and the symbolic white debutante's gown. When I led her out on the floor for the first dance, she burst into a delighted peal of laughter. All were charmed with her happy innocence.
I wore white when I married Stephen.
What are you suggesting, Betty? That I'm substituting one false image for another? On what basis? Your involvement with Rodney? I've forgiven that.
I tricked Rodney into marrying me.
That too. In fact, I can forgive everything but the annulment. And there I hold Leslie Harrington responsible. Very well, Betty. You made a mistake. And by my antiquated standards, a bad one. But at least you did it out of love. Not because of a sudden whim to take another woman's husband. Brian Cord was a novelty to Catherine. Nothing more.
She might have believed she was in love with him.
Rubbish.
It's very easy for you to say that. People are always ready to condemn someone when they don't even know what that person is thinking or feeling.
Oh?
Sometimes a girl will put on a big sophisticated front when she's really scared to death inside.
Really?
Oh, she was very young when all this happened.
At the age of 18, Catherine was thrill-seeking, self-centered, and amoral. Have I shocked you? I may have pretended to the world, but never to myself. Betty. Stop identifying yourself with my daughter. You're very different.
That must be Mr. Costa.
Don't disappoint me, Betty. I have very high hopes for you.
Is that the way the editor of the Clarion finds out what's happening in the world?
Good morning, Dad.
Haven't you anything better to do than stand there admiring yourself?
It's just a little Yankee ingenuity. You know, in the hands of a right man, a paperclip like this can do a lot more than hold papers.
Why don't you put stays in your collar like everybody else?
Because I haven't got time. This morning, I have an interview in White River in exactly 33 minutes. Well,
Slept so late you didn't even have time to put stays in your collar.
well, what'd you do anyway? Shut up your shop, come down here to needle your poor old lazy son?
No, I had to come. I didn't want to, but I had to.
Well, what's the trouble?
Chandler?
What about him?
Empty. Blame coffee pot's empty.
Never mind the coffee. What about Chandler?
He come pussyfooting into my store.
Give you any trouble?
Oh, nothing I couldn't handle.
What do you want?
He was fishing.
For what?
Anything he could get his hook into. Mostly for a tough trout by the name of Elliot Carson.
Ha ha! Great. Excuse me, Dad. That's just great. He's getting a little edgy, huh? Good. That's just the way I want him to feel. I want him to feel as if everywhere he goes, I've just been there. Thank you, Dad, for this lovely piece of information.
Elliot. He found out that I was asking questions about him in Hastings Valley.
You mean to tell me you've already been to Hastings Valley?
Mm-hmm. A couple of days ago.
Why the blazes didn't you tell me?
Wasn't ready. Wanted to ask a few more questions of people first.
Oh, that's just great. Marvelous. I asked you to find out something about Jack Chandler, so Jack Chandler finds out before I find out.
Well, that's what I'm here now for.
Oh, what'd you find out?
Bristol.
Bristol.
Mm-hmm. Walt Bristol.
Walt Bristol. Who's Walt Bristol?
Used to carry the mail for the RFD when Chandler was there.
Oh, he's a mailman. That's fine. Well, what about it?
He remembers Chandler as kind of a surly cuss with very uninterested mail. You know, seed catalogs, maybe a hunting magazine, but no letters.
And that's all, huh?
Wait a minute, let me tell you. When Chandler first moved there, Walt delivered some letters for another man in care of Chandler.
What was his name?
Well, that's just the rub. Walt's so old he can't remember. He can't remember to save his neck. He thinks it was a name like Franklin or Foster.
Franklin? Foster?
Yeah, something like that, but he just can't be sure. That's why I didn't come running in here like I discovered the Lost Dutchman gold mine.
Don't worry about it. That's a start, Dad. It's a start.
Maybe, maybe not.
So Chandler had someone living with him on that farm, eh? Maybe somebody that was hiding there. That's a link, Dad. It's a link to the past that Chandler's been trying to cover up so hard.
I was afraid of this.
Afraid of what?
That you'd go around like a chicken with your head off 6 ways for Sunday. Walt Bristow's 82 years old. He takes a nap between sentences. Maybe it was Chandler's farm, maybe it was the next one, maybe it was in the next county. You just can't go running wild because something old Walt Bristow said he thinks he remembers.
Well, I know someone who'll know for sure.
No, Elliot, no.
Yes. Rachel's been living with Chandler at that farmhouse since the very first day he got there.
She's been trying to forget that.
I know it. I'm just going to have to remind her, that's all.
I must be psychic or something. I just made a fresh pot of coffee.
I already had my cup for the day.
Doctor's orders?
Well, how about a glass of milk?
There's plenty in the fridge.
Oh, no thanks. What do you hear around?
I was just going to ask you. You know, between the drugstore and the tavern, we could probably put out a pretty good gossip sheet.
Yeah, that's an idea. Oh, my friend Rachel's starting classes at night school.
Gee, that's great.
Yeah, I thought her uncle Chandler might have told you about it.
No?
He comes in here, doesn't he?
Oh, once in a while.
Well, I heard he was an old-time customer from even before I was born.
Where'd you hear that?
Around.
Look, honey, if I tried to remember everybody who ever came in here in the past 20 years, why...
Was he a friend of my father's?
Every guy who ever stood Eddie Jacks a drink was his friend. By your daddy's count, he probably had hundreds of them.
So funny to hear you call a man I never knew my daddy. What was he like?
What's any man like who'd walk out on his wife and baby daughter a month and a half after she was born?
Mom, is that really the way it happened?
Well, sure. You've known that practically ever since you could talk.
Sometimes people tell little kids things that aren't exactly true.
Why would I lie to you?
Say for my own good. Like if he was in prison or had passed away.
You mean died?
Yeah, you know, suddenly, like a heart attack.
Honey, when did you see Dr. Rossi last?
Yesterday.
Did he check you over real good?
No, I just wanted to talk to him. Wasn't my regular appointment.
You mean he called you in special?
Nope, I went on my own. I just had a couple of questions I wanted to ask him. Like, could I babysit for the Carsons when Rachel's in night school? He said no. And?
And?
And was I going to get well?
Baby.
He said, of course.
Now, what if it gave you the dumb idea you wouldn't?
That's what he said, too. Then I asked him if what I had was something you could, inherit. He said absolutely not.
You get rheumatic fever from a germ. Everybody knows that.
Yeah, but suppose in spite of what Dr. Rossi said, you could inherit it, and I got well enough to have a baby and I passed it on to my child.
Look, honey, I'm as sound as a bell. The only trouble your father ever had with his heart came from liking variety and his lady friends.
You sure?
Maybe solid brass, but I'll bet it's ticking up a storm wherever he is.
Thanks, Mom. You didn't really have it very easy, did you? Chandler and Dad sound like two peas out of the same pod.
Your father had his faults, honey, but he wasn't a Chandler.
Then they weren't friends?
Of course not. Come on out and back. I've got those buttons you wanted for your spring suit.